Berlin, August 13, 1961. In the early hours of the morning, soldiers, construction workers, and border police swarm the city's dividing line. Streets are barricaded, families separated, and windows sealed shut. By sunrise, a concrete wall begins to rise, a physical and ideological boundary that will split Berlin and the world for nearly 3 decades. This wall, declared the anti-fascist protection rampart by East Germany's Socialist Unity Party, SED, was more than a barrier. It was a symbol of Cold War division and oppression. At the heart of this oppressive machinery stood Erich Mielke, the enigmatic and ruthless head of the Ministry for State Security, or Stasi. For 31 years, Mielke's ministry operated as the shield and sword of the SED, wielding surveillance, propaganda, and fear to maintain control. Through its network of informants and advanced technology, the Stasi became one of the most infamous secret police forces in history, ensuring the Berlin Wall was more than a line of concrete. It was a system of total control. This article delves into the chilling story of the Berlin Wall, the Stasi's role in enforcing its dominance, and the moments of resistance and eventual collapse that brought an end to this symbol of division. From daring escapes and brutal crackdowns to the eventual fall of the Iron Curtain, we'll explore how one wall defined an era and how its fall reshaped the world. In the years leading up to 1961, East Germany stood on the brink of collapse. Over 2 million people had fled to the West since the division of Germany in 1949. Skilled workers, doctors, engineers, and intellectuals were leaving in droves, creating a brain drain that East Germany's Socialist Unity Party, SED, could not afford. Families were torn apart as they crossed freely into West Berlin, seeking the promise of a better life. The SED leadership, led by Walter Ulbricht, knew drastic measures were needed to stop this mass exodus. The Berlin border became a weak point in the Iron Curtain. While barbed wire and Soviet tanks lined other parts of the East-West divide, Berlin remained porous. East Berliners could cross into West Berlin with relative ease, using open checkpoints to escape to freedom. The economic disparity between the two sides grew ever more apparent as West Berlin, buoyed by American aid, prospered while East Berlin struggled under Soviet-style central planning. For the SED, this exodus was not just an economic issue, but an existential threat. The government portrayed those fleeing as traitors, deserters of the Republic, but privately, they understood the deeper implications. By mid-1961, Ulbricht and his inner circle began planning an audacious solution, sealing the Berlin border entirely. In secret meetings, Erich Mielke, head of the Ministry for State Security, Stasi, and other key officials crafted a plan to close the border under the codename Operation Rose. The operation would be swift, decisive, and merciless, a defining moment for East Germany's authoritarian regime. In the early hours of August 13, 1961, Operation Rose began. Thousands of East German soldiers, police, and construction workers moved into position along the Berlin border. Roads were blocked, bridges were sealed, and temporary barricades of barbed wire sprung up overnight. Armed patrols took their places, ensuring no one could slip through the newly fortified border. The Stasi, always operating in the shadows, monitored every detail, ready to detain anyone suspected of dissent. By morning, the reality of the situation sank in for Berliners on both sides of the divide. Families found themselves abruptly separated, their loved ones trapped on the other side of a hastily drawn line. The panic was palpable as East Berliners rushed to reach West Berlin, but the barriers were already in place. Some tried jumping from windows overlooking the border, while others attempted to cut through the barbed wire. For many, it was too late. Erich Mielke saw the construction of the wall as a personal triumph. His ministry had worked tirelessly to prevent escapes and maintain order. The Berlin Wall was not just a physical barrier, it was a psychological weapon. Mielke's infamous words echoed throughout East Germany. The working class has seized power, never to let it go again. For Mielke, the wall symbolized the ultimate victory of socialism over capitalism, a shield to protect the East from Western influence. The initial wall, a crude structure of barbed wire and concrete blocks, was only the beginning. Over the years, it would evolve into a complex and deadly system, complete with watchtowers, minefields, and the infamous death strip, a barren stretch of land designed to make crossing nearly impossible. Mielke's Stasi took on the task of ensuring the wall remained impenetrable, using informants, surveillance technology, and brutal force to suppress any attempt to escape. The construction of the Berlin Wall sent shockwaves across the globe. Western leaders condemned the act, but no direct action was taken to stop it. The wall stood as a chilling symbol of the Cold War, dividing families, communities, and an entire nation. For East Germany, it marked the beginning of a new chapter, one of surveillance, control, and the relentless suppression of dissent. The Berlin Wall was designed to be impenetrable, a physical and psychological barrier that would halt the flood of East Germans fleeing to the West. Yet no amount of concrete or barbed wire could quench the human desire for freedom. Over the years, thousands risked their lives to escape, employing ingenuity, courage, and sheer determination. For every escape attempt, the Stasi, under Erich Mielke's command, devised increasingly ruthless methods to counter them. From its earliest days, the Berlin Wall became a battleground of ingenuity and oppression. Escapees used a range of daring methods, tunneling under the wall, swimming across the Spree River, or flying homemade hot air balloons over the barrier. Some crafted clever disguises or forged documents to slip past border guards unnoticed. Each successful escape was a humiliation for Mielke's Stasi, a crack in the facade of East German control. For Mielke, the stakes were personal. Every defection was viewed as a direct threat to the legitimacy of the Socialist Unity Party, SED, and its grip on power. To counter the escapees, the Stasi established an extensive surveillance network. Informants were planted among border patrols, and every guard station was monitored to prevent collusion. Special units were tasked with uncovering escape tunnels, often installing microphones underground to detect digging. Escape attempts were meticulously tracked, with detailed reports sent to Mielke's office. Despite these efforts, the escapes continued. One of the most infamous episodes occurred in October 1964, when 57 people fled to West Berlin through a tunnel beneath Bernauer Strasse. It was the largest mass escape in the history of the wall. Though the Stasi discovered the tunnel, it was too late to stop the refugees. This success became a rallying cry for others seeking freedom, even as the risks grew higher. Not all escapes ended in triumph. For many, the attempt to cross the Berlin Wall ended in tragedy. Between 1961 and 1989, at least 140 people lost their lives trying to breach the wall, their deaths a stark reminder of the regime's brutality. Among them was Michael Bittner, a 23-year-old who was shot in November 1986 as he attempted to climb the wall. He had written multiple relocation requests, all denied by the Stasi. In a desperate bid for freedom, he paid the ultimate price. The Stasi went to great lengths to cover up such deaths, fearing international condemnation. Official narratives painted escapees as criminals or pawns of Western provocateurs. In Bittner's case, the Stasi forged an arrest warrant after his death, claiming he was part of a human smuggling gang. His death, like so many others, was buried in secrecy, hidden from public view to preserve the regime's image. Even border guards were not immune to the wall's tragedies. In the early years, overwhelmed by the constant pressure and moral conflict, some guards defected to the West themselves. One such incident, where a border guard escaped with a family he was assigned to protect, became a source of immense embarrassment for the Stasi. Mielke responded by tightening surveillance over his own personnel, ensuring loyalty through fear. As the years went on, the Stasi's methods became more sophisticated and brutal. Escape tunnels were a particular focus of their countermeasures. When informants revealed plans for a tunnel, the Stasi set traps, collapsing tunnels or planting agents to intercept escapees. One chilling operation involved an ambush where Stasi agents waited inside a tunnel for diggers to arrive. Shots were fired, and one escape helper, Siegfried Nofke, was killed as he attempted to bring his family to safety. Even after his death, the Stasi fabricated a narrative to discredit him, portraying him as a tool of Western sabotage. Beyond physical barriers, the Stasi weaponized psychological control. Surveillance footage, interrogation reports, and detailed profiles were compiled on anyone suspected of plotting an escape. Friends, neighbors, and even family members were recruited as informants. The Stasi's message was clear: no one could be trusted, and no secret could be kept. Despite their efforts, escapes continued to haunt Mielke's ministry. Each successful flight was a crack in the wall's foundation, a testament to the unyielding human spirit and the futility of totalitarian control. Yet for every success, there were countless stories of lives lost, families shattered, and dreams deferred. The battle between those seeking freedom and those enforcing oppression defined life along the Berlin Wall. For the Stasi, each escape was a reminder of their failure, a dent in the system they had sworn to uphold. But even as the wall stood tall, its foundation was beginning to weaken, and cracks were forming that no amount of surveillance could stop. To Erich Mielke and his Ministry for State Security, control was paramount. The Berlin Wall was not merely a physical barrier, but a symbol of the complete surveillance and oppression that defined life in East Germany. The Stasi evolved into an unparalleled intelligence apparatus, monitoring every aspect of society to maintain the grip of the Socialist Unity Party, SED. By the 1970s and 1980s, this shield and sword of the party had transformed into a sprawling surveillance machine, leaving no corner of East Germany untouched. The border crossings were among the most critical points of surveillance. They were the gateways where travelers moved between East and West, bringing with them information, goods, and, most dangerously, ideas. Mielke understood the symbolic and practical importance of controlling these choke points. In 1964, the Stasi took over all passport controls, embedding their agents in plain sight as East German border guards. Their job went far beyond checking papers. They were tasked with gathering intelligence on everyone who crossed. Every interaction with border guards was an opportunity for the Stasi to extract information. Travelers from West Berlin, visiting relatives in the East, were often subjected to harmless chats meant to identify inconsistencies in their stories or detect potential smugglers. Any irregularity in travel documents was grounds for further interrogation, with detailed reports filed for higher-ups in the ministry. By the 1980s, this department of the Stasi had grown to over 7,000 employees, making it the largest branch of the ministry. Their mission: to monitor, document, and report on all who crossed the border. For the millions who passed through these checkpoints, every moment was scrutinized. Papers were checked and rechecked, luggage was inspected, and even casual conversations were meticulously analyzed. To the travelers, it may have seemed like an inconvenience. To the Stasi, it was a goldmine of intelligence. Under Mielke's leadership, the Stasi expanded its reach to unprecedented levels. By the 1970s, the Ministry for State Security employed over 80,000 full-time operatives, supported by an estimated 170,000 informants, ordinary citizens recruited to spy on their neighbors, colleagues, and even family members. There was no aspect of East German life too small for the Stasi's attention. Phone lines were tapped, mail was intercepted, and homes were bugged. Entire blocks of apartments were monitored, with informants stationed in nearly every building. The Stasi even maintained secret testing facilities to experiment with new surveillance methods. These facilities were used to develop and refine tools like motion sensors, microphones, and even specialized barriers capable of stopping vehicles or tanks. Every technological advancement was aimed at preventing escape or descent. The Stasi's surveillance extended into the psychological realm as well. They perfected the art of Zersetzung, or decomposition, a form of psychological warfare designed to break down dissidents and destroy their reputations. Targets were isolated, their personal relationships sabotaged, and their careers ruined, all while the Stasi worked in the shadows. The goal was to make resistance seem futile, to erode trust and create a society where no one felt safe. For the Stasi, the Berlin Wall was more than a barrier. It was an excuse to justify their ever-growing power. As long as the wall stood, the threat of Western influence and escape could be cited to expand surveillance operations. Mielke used this pretext to transform East Germany into what many historians describe as the most heavily monitored society in history. Even the smallest items that could aid an escape, diving equipment, rope, or materials for hot air balloons, were confiscated immediately. The Stasi enforced strict control over travel, media, and public gatherings, ensuring that no challenge to the SED's authority could take root. Each escape attempt, even those that failed, was studied in painstaking detail. New measures were then implemented to close any perceived gaps in the system. Despite the appearance of total control, cracks in the system were always present. Informants could be unreliable, and technological failures occasionally allowed individuals to slip through. Still, the Stasi's overwhelming presence created an environment of paranoia that ensured most East Germans stayed in line. The fear of being watched, of being reported, was often enough to suppress dissent before it could even begin. The Stasi's surveillance machine was a cornerstone of Erich Mielke's vision for East Germany. Its reach was vast, its methods ruthless, and its presence inescapable. But no amount of control could suppress the human desire for freedom. Beneath the surface, unrest simmered, and the cracks in the Stasi's facade would soon begin to widen, setting the stage for the wall's ultimate collapse. For decades, the Berlin Wall stood as an unyielding symbol of division, guarded by the Stasi's formidable surveillance machine and backed by the iron will of the Socialist Unity Party, SED. But by the 1980s, the foundation upon which East Germany was built had begun to crumble. Economic decline, growing dissatisfaction among its citizens, and political shifts in the Eastern Bloc created a perfect storm. The wall, once a tool of control, became a liability. East Germany's economy was on life support by the late 1970s. Decades of centralized planning and dependence on Soviet support had left the nation in a perpetual state of stagnation. While the West enjoyed prosperity, East Germans faced food shortages, outdated infrastructure, and limited consumer goods. Meanwhile, the SED leadership borrowed heavily from Western banks, leaving the regime dangerously reliant on foreign creditors. The cracks were not just economic, but deeply social. Requests to emigrate soared in the 1980s as more East Germans sought a way out of their stagnant lives. The Stasi worked tirelessly to suppress these applications, employing harassment, threats, and public shaming to deter applicants. However, these measures only fueled resentment. By 1989, over 100,000 formal applications to leave had been filed, an unprecedented figure that underscored the growing unrest. At the same time, change was sweeping across Eastern Europe. In Hungary, reformers began dismantling sections of the Iron Curtain, allowing citizens to flee to the west. This created a ripple effect, with thousands of East Germans traveling to Hungary or Czechoslovakia in search of freedom. Refugee camps swelled, and international media began broadcasting the East German crisis to the world. The image of packed trains carrying defectors through East Germany to the west became a symbol of the regime's crumbling control. By the fall of 1989, protests against the SED had reached a fever pitch. What began as small demonstrations in Leipzig quickly spread to other cities, including East Berlin. Tens of thousands of people marched through the streets, demanding freedom of speech, free elections, and the right to travel. The once dreaded Stasi, found itself overwhelmed by the sheer scale of dissent. Faced with mounting pressure, the SED leadership scrambled to regain control. On November 9, 1989, in a desperate attempt to appease the public, a new travel policy was hastily announced. At a press conference, SED spokesperson Günter Schabowski fumbled with the details, famously stating that travel restrictions would be lifted immediately without delay. His vague statement sparked confusion and hope among East Germans who began gathering at border crossings across Berlin that very night. At the Bornholmer Strasse crossing, thousands of East Berliners demanded to be let through. Stasi Lieutenant Colonel Harold Jaeger, overwhelmed and without clear orders from superiors, made a fateful decision. He opened the gates. Thousands poured through to West Berlin, greeted by cheering crowds on the other side. In that moment, the Berlin Wall, the symbol of division and oppression, was no more. Images of jubilant Berliners tearing down the wall with hammers and chisels were broadcast around the world, marking the end of an era. The fall of the Berlin Wall spelled the beginning of the end for Erich Mielke's Ministry for State Security. For decades, the Stasi had maintained its iron grip through fear and surveillance, but in the face of widespread revolt, its power unraveled rapidly. Offices were stormed by citizens, and thousands of files documenting the regime's surveillance activities were exposed. The Stasi, once seemingly invincible, crumbled under the weight of its own secrecy. For Mielke, the collapse was personal. Just 4 days after the wall fell, he delivered a speech in East Germany's parliament, declaring, "I love all people. Truly, I do." His words, met with jeers, underscored how disconnected he had become from the reality outside his ministry. Within weeks, the Stasi was officially disbanded, and Mielke was arrested, marking the end of one of history's most infamous security apparatuses. The cracks in the Berlin Wall began as whispers of dissent, quiet calls for freedom that grew louder with each passing year. By 1989, those whispers became a roar, toppling not just the wall, but the oppressive regime it represented. The once mighty barrier that divided a city and the world became a relic of the past, a reminder of the resilience of the human spirit and the inevitable collapse of tyranny. The fall of the Berlin Wall on November 9, 1989, marked the end of an era, but it was only the beginning of a long process of reckoning. For East Germany, the collapse of the wall meant the dissolution of a regime that had relied on surveillance, fear, and control to maintain its grip on power. For the world, it was the most visible and visceral symbol of the Cold War's end. Yet, as the dust settled, the scars of division and oppression remained. For Erich Mielke, the man who had stood at the helm of East Germany's Ministry for State Security for over 3 decades, the collapse of the Berlin Wall signaled his fall from grace. Once one of the most powerful men in East Germany, Mielke became a figure of disdain and ridicule. On December 7, 1989, he was arrested for his role in the Stasi's brutal operations, facing charges for the killings of those who had sought freedom from the regime. In court, Mielke appeared disoriented and out of touch, at one point famously declaring, "I love all people," a claim that rang hollow for the victims of his regime. He was ultimately convicted of crimes committed decades earlier, including his involvement in political murders during the 1930s. However, due to his failing health, he served only a brief sentence before being released. Erich Mielke died in obscurity in May 2000, a man whose legacy was irrevocably tied to oppression and fear. After the wall fell, East Germans flooded Stasi offices across the country, determined to uncover the truth about the organization that had monitored their lives for so long. The scale of the Stasi's surveillance was staggering. Over 6 million people were documented in its archives, roughly 1/3 of East Germany's population. These files, meticulously kept and chillingly detailed, contained reports on friends, neighbors, colleagues, and even family members. The discovery of these files brought both closure and heartbreak. many East Germans learned for the first time that those closest to them had acted as informants, reporting their private lives to the regime. The archives also revealed the extent of the Stasi's psychological warfare, with dossiers detailing how individuals were harassed, blackmailed, and systematically broken. In 1990, the German government established the Stasi Records Agency to preserve and make these files accessible to the public. This unprecedented act of transparency allowed victims to confront their past, while historians and journalists uncovered the full scope of the Stasi's operations. The files served as a stark reminder of the dangers of unchecked state power and the fragility of personal freedoms. The fall of the Berlin Wall signified more than just the reunification of Germany. It was a powerful symbol of hope, freedom, and the end of division. Yet the scars it left behind were deep. Families remained fractured, communities struggled to rebuild trust, and the economic disparity between East and West persisted for years after reunification. The Wall's legacy also extended beyond Germany. Its fall marked the beginning of the end for the Cold War and the Soviet Union itself. Across Eastern Europe, nations under Soviet control began to break free, inspired by the resilience of those who had toppled the wall. It was a moment that redefined the global balance of power and ushered in a new era of international relations. For those who lived under the shadow of the wall, its fall was both a triumph and a reminder of the sacrifices made along the way. The stories of those who resisted the regime, who risked everything to escape, and who fought for freedom remain a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. The Berlin Wall stood for 28 years, dividing a city, a nation, and the world. Its collapse took only a matter of hours, but represented decades of resistance, suffering, and longing for a better future. Today, the wall serves as both a historical artifact and a warning, a reminder that no wall, no matter how high or well guarded, can suppress the desire for freedom forever. The Berlin Wall was more than just a physical barrier of concrete and barbed wire. It was a manifestation of an ideological battle that defined the second half of the 20th century. For nearly 3 decades, it stood as a stark reminder of a divided world, a line separating freedom and oppression, hope and despair. Its construction in 1961 symbolized the height of Cold War tensions, but its fall in 1989 became the defining moment of a world inching toward unity. For East Germany, the wall represented the lengths to which a regime would go to suppress dissent and maintain control. Under Erich Mielke's leadership, the Ministry for State Security turned the wall into a weapon of psychological warfare, creating a society ruled by fear and suspicion. Yet, despite the Stasi's all-encompassing surveillance, the human spirit proved indomitable. Each escape, each protest, and each act of resistance chipped away at the wall's foundation long before it physically fell. The fall of the Berlin Wall was not just the collapse of a structure, it was the collapse of an oppressive system and the beginning of a new chapter for Germany and the world. It marked the triumph of unity over division and demonstrated that no regime, no matter how powerful or pervasive, can suppress the desire for freedom forever. Today, fragments of the wall remain as a solemn reminder of its history. Memorials and museums honor the sacrifices of those who risked everything for a chance at freedom, ensuring that their stories are never forgotten. The Stasi files, once hidden in secret archives, now stand as a warning against the dangers of totalitarianism and the importance of safeguarding human rights. The Berlin Wall's story is a testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring hope for a better future. It reminds us that even in the darkest moments of division, change is possible. And as history has shown, the walls we build, whether physical or ideological, can only stand so long before they crumble under the weight of the human spirit's determination to break free. History comes alive when we explore the stories, struggles, and triumphs that shape the world we live in today. If you enjoyed traveling back in time with us, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to Global Time Travelers for more epic explorations of the past. Want to stay ahead of our next adventure? Click the bell icon so you're always notified when we uncover another chapter of history. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What part of this story resonated most with you? Or let us know where you'd like us to journey next. Thank you for being a part of our time-traveling community. Until our next expedition, stay curious, stay adventurous, and keep exploring the stories that make us who we are. See you in the next video.